Good morning, everybody. Words of Jesus in Matthew 22. The greatest command is this: to love the Lord your God with all your hearts, all your soul, and all your strength, all your might. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. The two greatest commands. A great way to start our thoughts, aiming us toward the two greatest things, and what God has done and what He expects us and wants us to do for one another. Nothing greater than that. So good to see you this morning. What a great day we have. We're blessed by so many people here. We're blessed by what God has done for us. And for those at Central, we're blessed by having a part in this congregation. And for you visiting, we're blessed by having you here. I want to start in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 this morning. You could probably at least quote the first part of this, and that's really where I'm going to aim it toward. As we introduce this subject, I'll not tell you the title so much. As we get into it, we'll describe it as we get along the way here. The very first words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In other words, before there was anything, there was something. That something wasn't innate. It wasn't obscure. It was not just molecules. It was God. A great and awesome God, an all-powerful God. A God who could start things going, and then as He gets the process going, say, now you keep going. And He had these seeds that continued to plant plants and produced more seeds, etc., and all that through mankind. But it's not only built to continue, but God still continues in that. I want you to see that. The words of Paul when he was preaching in Acts chapter 17. He was on a missionary journey, and he's out in this great place, Athens, and there's all these different idols out there, and he begins talking about the one true God that they didn't know, and he talks about this God, and he says that in Him we live and move and have our being. So God's still involved in this process. He started it, this great and powerful God, and it's still taking place and still evolving around, not evolving like scientists think in that sense, but it still continues to move because God still keeps it moving. He's active, in other words, in all that's doing. Now, as you think about that, think about this also. As God started all of this, from where I'm looking at it, He has intentionally created all this stuff to be unpredictable. We didn't know what the weather was for sure going to be like. And our weather forecasters gotten pretty good at that, but they still miss it from time to time. And you want to talk about what's going to happen next week? Well, they're guessing this or that, but we don't know. It's unpredictable. Worse than that, though, or even more difficult than that, is you and I. Because we don't know what's going to happen next in our lives. We're unpredictable. As we hang around some of our friends or our family, they're unpredictable. Our mates are unpredictable. The kids are unpredictable. And kids go, boy, the parents are really unpredictable. We're all unpredictable. We live in something that is unpredictable. This God who's gotten all of this stuff going and is still involved in it, and this is important for us to understand, sets things going in a certain direction, and He lets it go, and we don't know what's going to happen next. Now, there's where our problem lies, you see. It goes kind of like this. Because life is unpredictable, it gets out of control. Is that not what you say sometimes? We'll look out and we'll say, boy, that guy driving down the road, and all of a sudden he lost control of his car. Or we might have to say, well, the situation came up, and the situation got out of control. Or you might say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but my feelings got out of control. And we use that term, or we hear it used quite often. At least we feel that phrase within us sometimes, that life is out of control. And it's because, in part, because God's created it to be that way. And there's a reason for that as we're looking at this. Now let's look at Matthew chapter 8. And I want to read verses 23 to 27. And if you got your Bibles, I want to invite you to open up and read along with me as we look at an example of life being out of control. Now here's Jesus, Son of God, on this earth. He's doing his ministry as far as this part is concerned. He's got his apostles with him. And we pick up in verse 23, it says, now, when he, that is capital H, that's talking about Jesus, he got into a boat, and his disciples followed him. Of course they're following him. They followed Jesus wherever. Or think about this just for a moment from the earthly standpoint. This is a carpenter getting into the boat. All right? So he doesn't know a whole lot about boats per se. He might, because he lived along the Sea of Galilee, know some things. But as far as humanity is concerned, he's a carpenter getting in a boat, and he's got some apostles with him. Now, along with him are some people that do know about boats. We'll talk about that in a moment. But as they're out, verse 24, it says, suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves. But he, capital H, that's Jesus, was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing, because of the storms, of course. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose and he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Now his apostles, the ones who have left everything to follow him, they see him as the one that's God sent. They may not have figured out just yet that he's the Son of God, but they will soon capture that part. But they know he's the anointed one of God. They're following him. It says, these men marveled, saying, who can this be? That even the winds and the sea obey him. Now Jesus is directing things. He comes along and we're going to get in the boat. They say, yes, sir. They go and get in the boat. They probably told some of the guys along the way, get the boat ready. We're going to all get in the boat. Now, 12 men in a boat, 13, I should counting Jesus, it's not some little skiff here. I mean, it's got to be pretty good size. I'd say fishing boat size. Possibly, remember now there are 4 of these guys that are apostles that are fishermen. So there might be some connection there with some friends that loaned them a boat or however it is, but they've got a boat. Maybe they're renting it. But it's big enough for all these guys to get in. And as they're starting out, and I'll think on earthly terms, there's a carpenter getting in a boat, and he directs things, but who's going to be pushing the boat off? The fishermen, of course. They've been doing this all their lives. They know how to do it. I'll push, Peter says. He's one that steps out quite often. He gets things going, and who sets the sails? The fishermen. Because they know how to keep things organized and get things going. So they get out on the water, and they're kind of looking up, and they're seeing the clouds coming up kind of quick. They're all looking at each other and thinking, this doesn't look too good. Okay, Peter, what do? They don't say, okay, Jesus. Jesus is sleeping. They're going to ask the fishermen that have been in the boats all their lives, what do we do next? Well, set the sail this way, turn to the right, So the whole time, before this thing just becomes the ultimate calamity we read about, think about the process. They're all managing or trying to manage it until it gets out of control. Now, the only person that's not really been concerned about anything going on in the boat is the one that can really handle it is Jesus. He's sleeping. And I want you to see it because it's a great parallel to life. We're going along fine and we think we're pushing the sails and we're steering our life, and we're turning this and that, and we look up and we see a few clouds and go, oh, okay, we're going to have to manage here a little bit more. And then things get a little worse. Okay, we're going to, and then finally, you've been there. You might be there right now. You may have walked in these doors thinking, life's out of control today. It wasn't today, it might have been last week. But you've been there. I don't have to say, well, it'll eventually come. No, you've been there. Life out of control. I'm talking reality. To any one of us. Doesn't matter how old or how young we are, life gets out of control. And at that moment, we don't know what to do. Now let's look at another situation before we come down to what to do with all this. Let's go to the Old Testament. I like the Old Testament, and so does one of our visitors here today who's been in SD for a long time, Walter Harrington. That guy can stand up and preach for hours on Old Testament stories and not even catch a breath. Just keeps rolling. He had a little 15-minute Devo that lasted about 45 minutes, and he said he only had half his lesson done. Walter, I remember that. 1 Samuel 13. Walter doesn't have to, he knows what chapter we're talking about here. Talking about Saul and his army. Saul was the first king of Israel. Head and shoulders taller than anybody else. He's the one, obviously, that's leadership. He's in control. You want a guy like that up there leading the armies. So here's the king, made by Samuel, anointed. He's in control of what's going on. And he's coming down, and some Philistines gather up against him. Verse 5 here of chapter 13, 1 Samuel. Read it with me. It says, Then the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots. Now, not just the chariots. They mean the men that run that. Maybe 2 men on it, maybe 1. But there's an army there. And then with that, and 6,000 horsemen. Again, some more guys with spears or javelins or swords or whatever. And as the people, the rest of the soldiers now, as the sand. The only other time the Lord used that term that I remember right now is the one we're talking about. A fellow that didn't have any children. He said, you're going to have children. Your descendants are going to be like the sand of the seashore. In other words, you can't count them. So here's this vast army out there. They're so big they can't even be counted. And it's the enemy. And latter part of that verse says, and they came up and they encamped together in Michmash and at the east of Bethaven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, but the people were distressed. Then the people, notice they don't even call them soldiers now, they're the soldiers, hid in caves and thickets and rocks and holes and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to land on Gad and Gilead, so they're going the other direction. As for Saul, that's the king, the big leader that's always in control. He was still in Gilgal, and all the people were still trembling with him. And he waited 7 days. Now listen to what's going on here. According to the time set by Samuel. Samuel's the prophet. Now here's what goes on. When you're a king in charge of God's army, somebody's not happy with my sermon already. We're getting a response, but it's going the other direction. We are glad that he got out of the hospital, though, because he was sick last year. Thank God for answering prayer. So here we are. Saul's army's falling apart. His guys are hiding in caves. Some of them are crossing the river. They're going the other direction. And he's trying to figure out what to do. Here's a king, and his army's out of control. And anytime that's happened, it means the king's out of control. Now, Samuel is a prophet of God. Samuel, as we're reading about here, is supposed to be there sometime soon. Samuel says, I'm going to be there in 7 days. Day 6, and, being a king in charge of an army, and your army's running every direction, you're getting kind of panicking because it's out of control. And you don't know what to do. And you like to turn to God, but the prophet's not there to help you. Now, what the prophet usually does before you go into this battle, since you're one of God's people, is he offers a sacrifice. God sees the sacrifice, and when he does, you know you can go into battle, and God's going to bless that battle. That's what's going on all the way through. So the reason that the king, Saul, is waiting for Samuel to come is because he wants everything to pull together. People maybe see the sacrifice, the soldiers feel revived, and they think things are in control. God's going to lead us down there, and yet Samuel's not there yet. And day 7 clicks over, and Samuel's still not there. Now watch what goes on here. Because as we're reading this text, I want you to see as he's feeling this pressure on him, and we all know what that's like. Where am I at here? Verse 9. So Saul said, bring a burnt offering and peace offerings here to me. And he offered the burnt offering. Little point here for Old Testament studiers is that's illegal. Even if he's a king. God only allows prophets or his priests to do that, which Samuel is both. It's not for anybody else to do, not even king. But things were so out of control, mark it, he didn't know what else to do. And he broke God's law. Verse 10. Now it happened as soon as he finished presenting the burnt offering that Samuel came. Oh, man, if he just waited. That's it. But he couldn't. Because life was out of control. And so here you are. Look at the parallel here. The pressure's on. Things are falling apart. People are going the wrong direction. Nobody's on your side. Out of control. And you, under pressure, do something you're not supposed to do. And as soon as you do, go, oh, man. And that's us. Here's what I'm talking about this morning. There's only one big point here, is how do we deal with this? Because God started the thing going. He's still there. Now, we can't forget this. In Him we live and move and have our being. He's still doing things, but the problem is life is unpredictable, and I don't know what's going to happen next. But God does. Samuel could have hurried and been back there on day 3, but he didn't. I imagine God saying, wait, Samuel, I want to test my guy Saul here and see if he's going to do what I tell him to do. And Saul failed because life was out of control. And that's the thing here, as we're looking at all this, because a lot of times when the pressure really hits and all these things are happening around us, we get this stress situation and we don't behave like we ought to. Not like we want to. We feel miserable afterwards, but in the moment we don't know how to deal with it. Now let's look at another situation here. Book of Numbers, chapter 13. This is going back a little further in the Old Testament. Aren't you happy, Walter? Israel's told by God to send spies out to the promised land. We're going way back now. They've just gone through the Exodus. They've left Egypt. And the whole vast number of God's people are headed out, and they're going to the land of milk and honey, as it's described. The promised land, as it's termed. And they're going to send spies out, and God tells them to do this. I want you to go spy out this land and check it out. I want you to see how big the cities are and whether it's really fruitful and all this like you think it's supposed to be. So he sends 12, one from each tribe. 12 men come back. That's great. Nobody lost. And they get back and they start telling about what's going on. Verse 25 of Numbers 13. And they returned from the spying out of the land after 40 days. And when they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron, all the congregation of Israel, the wilderness of Paran Kadesh, they brought back word to them of the congregation, and they showed them the fruit. You can imagine, here they are, it's almost a month and a half, and it's exciting. The guys are coming back, and they're carrying grapes. It takes 2 men to carry a bunch of grapes. You're thinking, boy, this is super. Except, there's a problem. Let's read on, we'll see here. So they told them, and they said, we went to the land where you said it truly flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit. Nevertheless, oh, there it goes. But the people who dwell in the land are strong. Cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Those are the giants of the giants. And the Amalekites, those are the mean guys with tough gangs, I guess you could say in our terms. They dwell in the land of the south. And the Hittites and Jebusites and Amorites and every other height you can think of are in the mountains. And the Canaanites, and they dwell by the sea. And Caleb quieted him. He said, no, we can go, verse 30. Let's go. Verse 31, but the men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. Life's out of control. We can't do this. Thought we could, but it's out of control. Bigger than we thought. Issues bigger than I can imagine, and I don't know what to do. Now, if you've read through here, the rest of the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, what's going on here is after God gets through dealing with these people, since they wouldn't go, as punishment and as training, God sends them out into the desert for 40 days. 40 more and 40 more. You know, it's 40 years. 1 year for every day those spies are over in that land. They're out wandering in the wilderness. And this is what took place while they're wandering in the wilderness. God fed them every day. He didn't give them a month's worth of groceries and say, okay, guys, ration out. Figure it out. You can make it. He fed them every day, except the Sabbath. Stockpiled it for 2 days only, just before the Sabbath, so they wouldn't go out and work gathering it up. Not working on the Sabbath, not in our Old Testament law. So here they are. Can you imagine? Anybody here around 40 years old? That's pretty young. Go ahead, raise your hands. Good guys. Can you imagine spending your entire life wandering around in the desert, day in and day out? You go out, you get the manna for that day. Because you know God said it's a lesson that when things are out of control like they used to be, I'm going to show you who is in control. I'm going to feed you every day for 40 years. You're going to spend a lifetime learning that I'm in control. That it never gets out of control with me. When you need water, I'm going to provide it every day. When you wonder where you're going to go, I'm going to take care of that. If you remember the story, there was a cloud that followed them by day, and at night there was a pillar of fire. And anytime they wanted to go anywhere, that cloud lifted up and they said, oh, time to go. God says we're going. And it'd go over to a place and it'd stop, the cloud dropped down, they'd build a tent underneath there and say, we're staying here. And wherever the cloud went, they went. God took care of them for 40 years, exactly that way. So when they got through and they crossed over into the promised land, they'd have in their mind, over here, it's going to be out of control again, but God's going to take care of it. God is in charge. And even though it looks like things are out of control, God has a plan, and He is in control. He has not left me. The world is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Jobs are unpredictable. The market, the weather, the everything. ISIS, anything you can imagine out there. Mates and kids and everything, unpredictable. But God knows what's going to happen, and He can manage it. Not just barely, but it'll be part of His plan. So sometimes He'll send us through these training grounds of unpredictability. So we stop and think, wow, things are out of control. You're right. Because they never were in control. God is in control. And sometimes it might be torturous and lengthy. But as we're going through it, God says, I want you to learn this lesson. I've got it. It's taken care of. Now here's one more thing to add to that. We looked at the life of Jesus in Matthew chapter 4 for just a quick moment here. But I want you to see what's going on, because as Matthew unfolds, and I remember the first time I read this, and as a non-Christian, I was just kind of reading through the Bible. I was 22 years old, and I could read well enough. And all of a sudden, Jesus is getting ready to start a ministry, and then it says, He went out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. I thought, what for? He's going to learn as a human being that Satan wants to do his best to take control of your life. And that's what it's about. When he starts his ministry, Satan's wanting to take control. And he's going to go out and tempt, and he's going to do anything he can do to make you think you're being cheated by God. Oh, if you got this, you ought to have that. I'll give you better. No, but he really is after control. He wants to run your life. He doesn't want God running your life. He wants to run your life, and he'll run it into the ground and down under. So I want you to see that. As we're going through this whole thing of unpredictability of life, we've got another agent that's operating over here who hates us with a passion. He's God's enemy and he's ours, and he's called Satan. And he's trying to do all he can to take control of your life and pull you out of God's hands. So that's working against us. So what do we do? Go back to that very first passage in Matthew chapter 8, in the boat of Jesus. Knowing that storms are going to come, but that's okay because Jesus knows the storms are going to come. And as you're starting out in life and you're thinking things are going out of control, wait a minute. God knows that. He's got it. But what about if they really fall apart and nothing's going right? and this person has cancer, this happens or that happens. I don't know what happens here to your life, but I know what happens to mine, and it doesn't feel good. And at that time, we have to remember that God is still active. He's not just thrown this world into motion and then backed off and said, good luck. But he says, I'm right here. You need to wake me up. You get very sleepy. He's got control. Now let's look at one passage and we'll close the lesson. Romans chapter 8. You know, a preacher has a lot of favorite passages. This is one of mine. Possibly yours too. In amongst all these different blessings that are going on that are described, a lot of them in Romans chapter 8, one of the things that Paul says is we know. Confidence, Paul. An apostle here that's been through it all. Life's been out of control for him a lot, but he knew who really was in control. So he could say it like this. We know that all things, the out of control situations, the worst, the painful, whatever, all things work together for good to those who love God. Rephrase it, to those who are called according to His purpose. He's just kind of establishing that. What it means is when life really looks like it's out of control, and it looks terrible, and it looks horrible, and it looks like you're ready to give up, God's still managing it. And He can take the worst things, the very worst things, and He can make something great from it for you. Because God's in control, you see. But don't forget, in this unpredictable life, that Satan's over there whispering in your ear, trying to tell you you're in control. Do it your way, and He'll help you. And all that does is take you down a path where you think, I'm in control, and I can do this and that. If you don't have a plan, you don't even know what's going to go on tomorrow, because life is unpredictable. But God does. And here, does it not seem a bit crazy when you think about it from this standpoint, right here, just sitting in the auditorium? A bit crazy to think about, I'm going to run my life and God knows better how to do it. Why don't I just trust Him to manage this? When we hire doctors, we go to them to manage our health. We go to financial guys to manage this, and we go to friends for that, and all these things that go to God to take care of the plan that He's working anyway. And let Him be in control. Is He in control? I know He is, but here's the catch. You can let Him not be in control. You can decide God is my co-pilot, which means you're still piloting. We've seen that bumper sticker years ago. We kind of like it like that. And then when we're not going real good, here, steer God. Have you submitted to God, committed to Him in baptism, and just turn it over because He can wash your sins away? You can't manage them. And as many things as you want to do right, we still mess up, we still sin. Or maybe you've committed to Christ, and you've been a Christian, and you've been living life, and yet you're not living it like you ought to now. Then turn it over to God. But however we do, when we leave here today, let's remember that God can be in control if you'll let Him. He's arranged for it that way. It's crazy for us to even think we're in control. Let God do it. Now, here's the thing. You do get in the boat and you start to set the sail, but while you're going through these, you remember God's in control. I'm going to go about it. I'm going to try to do this, but if it doesn't go right, God will help me. It's not going to fall apart. God won't let it if you'll trust Him. So you do what you can do in trying to serve God and let Him guide you the way you can. And when it seems like it's out of control, don't freak out. Just turn loose and put it in an autopilot. Let God handle it. If your life isn't in God's control, come down front while we stand.